Welcome to the Rider's Edge podcast, a platform to share conversations about the health and wellness of horse and rider. I'm your host, Farley Schweigert. Hey y'all, this is Farley with the Rider's Edge podcast, and today I am talking with Brian Pryor of LiteForce Laser. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Farley. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So kind of one of our traditions here on the Rider's Edge podcast is that we let everybody kind of start with their story and tell us about themselves. So we won't change that tradition. So kind of give us the introduction to your story and we'll go from there.
Great. Yeah, so my story kind of started in, being a curious kid and liking science and math. And after I got a PhD in physical chemistry and made some kind of crazy esoteric lasers for chemistry and physics experiments, that's really what my degree was in. And then when I first got out of school, I started making lasers in a contract development house. People would call up with crazy ideas and we'd put proposals together or work with them to make lasers from drilling holes in computer chips to blinding missiles, like really diverse kind of things. And my first kind of medical laser was I did some of the original work on laser hair removal. So kind of studied on how light gets into tissue and how to get light to a hair follicle to, kill it. Basically, we want to heat the hair follicle and kill it before we burn the skin. So it's a lot more complex than it sounds. Many years of studying but worked great. It was a great market. It still is a great market, the aesthetic. And then I met my co-founder and I of LiteCure. We worked together in many different capacities, and I was kind of looking at starting a company, especially looking at laser therapy, right? And now it's called photobiomodulation. But really, when I was in the medical field and kind of going to various conferences and seeing what people were doing, I studied a lot on how to get light deep into the body. That's really, what I've done for many years, and felt that some of the light out there, people were using these kind of little laser flashlights or, laser pointers, that there's no way they're getting deep enough to have an effect, maybe on superficial things, maybe on some wounds. Okay. But really deep, like we can solve that problem. I have a background and can do research on wavelength and power and all the parameters to do that, and started working with some of the top biologists in the field. And the light definitely makes cells metabolize, move them around, heal, right? There's a lot of really good evidence in a petri dish. There was at the time that I was like, well, I know how to get the light deep to make these cells in your hamstring or in the back muscles on your horse to have an effect. But it's not going to work with these little tiny low-level lasers. So that's kind of the brainchild of LiteCure, how we got started. And then from there, we started selling into vet medicine pretty quickly. We did some trials, got some great results, and kind of kicked off our Pegasus laser brand, which we sell to equine veterinarians and therapists. Right off the bat, that was in very late 2006, early 2007. And really work with veterinarians while we're getting studies done and getting our FDA approval for the medical side. So we're very thankful to the veterinarian community for helping us. And to this day, we have a very big presence in vet medicine, both our Pegasus brand as well as the companion animal health brand to small animals. So that's kind of the onset of how I got into laser therapy.
Cool. What I like about this conversation is that we're going to be able to talk about both horse and rider today, because LiteCure has both products. We have the LiteForce laser, and then, like you just said, the Pegasus brand. So let's. I've kind of laid the foundation in a previous episode of what laser therapy does, but let's talk a little bit about that. And how it can help people and their horses.
Yeah, sure. So the key is to get light to the right spot, right? So we depend on therapists like yourself to figure out what that diagnosis and what that spot is that you want to target. And then the parameters basically are the laser power and the wavelength in order to get deep enough. And it's important the wavelength that you use based on the parameters of the skin and hair color for the case of horses or small animals. So you need to kind of select, and the products that we make have very easy. You just select the coat color and the skin color, and it adjusts for you. But that's important for people to know, because some wavelengths will stop right at the tissue if it's dark tissue or dark hair. Now, I kind of use an example. If you take your smartphone and turn on the flashlight and you put your finger over it, you'll see the flashlight is made up of all colors, right? RGB, or red, blue, and green. If you put your finger over it, you'll see just red coming through. So that kind of shows you the penetration of light. That red light penetrates through our body more than the green and the blue. So the green and the blue don't really come through the skin at all. They're not very good wavelengths to go deep into tissue. So red is good. Near infrared, even farther out that you can't see, is even better. So that's what we use. You can't see the beam that comes out of the light force or the Pegasus laser. You can't see it. You see an aiming beam, a red aiming beam, just to show you as a therapist, where the light's going to be for safety. But you don't see the infrared. So that's the most important thing, is that the longer the wavelength to a point, the deeper you can get. And that you have to, by the color of the skin of the person that you're treating is important, or on the animal side, the hair and the skin. So that's the first kind of thing, is make sure you have the best wavelength. And then power is also important, because, the more you have, the deeper you're going to go, just because a lot of things in our body absorb light. We're going to absorb some blood and water and other things. So the more you have, the deeper you're going to go. So we make lasers, that range from, 10 watts all the way to 40 watts. And so we started at 10 watts, and then 15, and then 25, and now we're up to 40. We sell the 40 for, human health. We just launched that in late last year. It's very good for pain management. So the way the light has a couple of different mechanisms of action. It absorbs in the cell and promotes healing by increasing metabolism, and the fuel for your cell is ATP, right? It's a molecule called ATP. We make it on our own. It's kind of our fuel for our cells. And a good analogy for people is kind of, that's your battery. The mitochondria of your cell is kind of your workhorse, right? It's the factory that's making energy, and it's responsible for making ATP. And when the cell's metabolism slows down, or you have an injury, that doesn't work optimally, right? So the factory is not putting out the optimal amount of energy. And by putting the right parameters of light in, it kind of jump starts that. It's kind of putting, jumper cables on your battery, and kind of gets it back to normal. So that's really the crux of the mechanism, that the light kind of inspires your mitochondria to make energy at the optimal rate for ATP. So that's in the essence of how it works to produce energy for your cells, and then helps with healing.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, I like having these kind of conversations, because I like PT nerding out on this stuff. But I just say, it just hyperdrives your cells and helps your body essentially heal itself. Like we're just helping the tissue to do what it already does, but better. Yeah,
that's a great analogy. That and there's been studies done. We looked at some studies on fatigue, and treated people before they exercised, and saw, and it helps with reducing fatigue. But the more, the closer you are to optimal, the less effect it has, right? So we did this really nice study looking at muscle fatigue, and the younger the people were, it didn't have as much of an effect, because their metabolism, if they're healthy and they're young, they're pretty much doing pretty well on their own. As we age, as we get injured, right? Not everybody's optimal, so it has an effect. But the less you are from optimal, the more effect it has.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the strengths that you have, because you've gone from 10 to 40 watts, I have a 25-watt machine, and I know when I saw you guys in Denver, which now seems like a lifetime ago, that I hung out with you guys. I was like, oh, you have the 40-watt now, right? Because I remember telling Steve, I don't think you'd gotten there yet. I was like, what are you doing with a 40-watt? I could burn a hole in a barn with this. But then I was like, oh, all these horses I've treated, I need it on the horses.
Yeah, and the 40-watt, the more power helps with penetration, and really it helps with speed of treatment. That's a big thing. But also there's a mechanism that we're seeing with the higher intensities, is that it helps with pain control. So there's another mechanism that when you hit neurons, right? Neurons have a lot of mitochondria. And so you slow down conduction, and you really slow down that pain kind of promotion through the nerve channel. So you don't feel pain. So with the 10, 15 watts, with lower powers, you're still going to get the healing effect. You're reducing inflammation. You're getting kind of this healing of injuries. But with the higher powers, you're getting that as well as that almost instant pain relief. So if people have chronic pain, especially, arthritis, or that you can really, get them like right after the treatment, they're feeling better. So that's kind of the advantage with the higher powers. You'll see that with the 25. I'm sure you see some of that with the 25 watt. The 40 watt allows you to do a bigger spot faster, right? So a lot of chronic pain is lower back, right? That's a big area. So, when you're lined up, and I'm sure if you go to a rodeo, you got riders lined up wanting to get treated, time is of the essence. So the 40 watt allows you to do it a little bit quicker.
Yeah. I think that's, I was so excited to talk to you guys about that, because it does change the time, and it does change some of the dynamics of treatment, because I want people to understand too about your product, Brian, is that with all the research you're putting behind it and everything that you've done with it, it stands up scientifically. It stands up what needs to, there's a lot of modalities out on the market that make a lot of claims. And this is the only one I've ever found that does what it says and is all that in a bag of chips, as one of my friends used to say.
Yeah, as a scientist, that's in my blood, and what the culture of the company is. We want to do, studies. We don't want to just go out and sell stuff that we don't believe in or have, really strong evidence that we have. So that's important to us. And even the 40 watt, we're a laser manufacturer. I built lasers into the hundreds of watts. It's not technological, crazily difficult, right? It's hard, but if you have the know-how of making high power lasers, isn't that difficult. But until we had the other technology to make sure that we can do it safely, we didn't launch. And that's why, the 40 watt took a little bit, because we have, a smart handpiece, we call it. And basically what it has is sensors in the handpiece of the laser. So it knows how fast you as a user is moving your hand. So we can give you feedback, that if you're going too slow or going too fast, that it buzzes at you, it blinks at you, it does all kinds of things. So you can use it, prudently. And it's important both from not only safety, but also to make sure that you're getting, the appropriate dosage patient to patient, right? Consistent treatments is what we want to do. And, we're selling to big practices, you have a lot of users, oftentimes, even in a vet or in a PT practice, they might have 30 associates using the laser. We want to make sure everybody, or an assistant, right there, they're having a PTA or a vet assistant or a vet nurse using the product. So we want to make sure everybody's getting good results. So that's why it's important to have that feedback.
Absolutely. I think that will help. I know it's already helping you guys standardize that treatment, because that was a little bit of a learning curve with myself when I got into using the laser, is making sure that it was applied correctly. And that's why it's important to work with a PT or a veterinary practice that has worked with it and is well versed in the technology, instead of just anybody on the street that looks like they have a laser or a red flashlight or whatever. and it's important to know the difference in those modalities. So kind of help us understand. We've set up, I feel like, a good foundation of that, but help us understand the difference in using the class 4 laser, which is what you guys have, and maybe other light products that are out there.
Yeah, so class 4 just means that it's above 500 milliwatts, which means it's a little bit higher power, but it's really about eye safety. That you should wear goggles when you're treating. Even if you're using a lower power, it's probably, good advice to use it in a confined area, and make sure you have goggles on, and make sure that, especially when you're treating people, of course, it's easy to give them goggles. When you're treating horses, make sure you have somebody helping kind of to turn their head away or cover their eyes with a black cloth or something. We did have these, blinders that we used to have, we supplied, and that's, was a good idea, but not a good idea in practice, right? And better than I do, putting those on, it's a little bit harder in practice.
Good theory, bad execution, probably.
Theory, it's good, right? For me, sitting behind my desk or in the lab, it's like, yeah, just give these blinders. But when you guys, probably everyone on this podcast knows better than I do, that's a little bit more challenging.
Here you go, put these on. This will work.
So, but if you have an assistant or you have someone, just covering or just keeping the head away, usually just holding, unless, I think mostly everywhere it's going to be, pretty hard to have the horse kind of look back, but using it with an assistant's a good idea. But yeah, so that's the biggest thing, I think. And the low power, it's what you're treating, what you're trying to treat. If you have a skin abrasion or a wound or something, then you have a chance of getting okay results with a handheld. Going deeper is going to be harder. It's going to take a long time, to treat, to get enough energy down deep. So be cautious about those kind of things. And even if you do ask your veterinarian or your PT or professional, what their guidance would be on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think no matter if we're talking about horses or humans, you've got to work within. You've got to know why you're doing what you're doing, and the best case practice for that.
And as we're learning that higher dosing, for certain things, certainly for wounds or burns or other things, the lower dosage is probably good. But for arthritis, for the pain control, we just our clinical vet director, Dr. Lisa Miller, and our CTO, Luis Di Taboada, just published a paper on degenerative myelopathy in dogs, just published, I think, last week, which is, a devastating disease that dogs get. And time to death is very, very short. And they worked with a veterinarian practice, a rehab professional, Deb Gross Saunders. She's actually interesting, kind of similar to you. She started as a human PT, and now, she's kind of the guru in dog and canine rehab in Connecticut, and does a lot of sporting dogs and police dogs and military dogs. So it's pretty interesting. She's one that she doesn't treat people anymore. But she started off on the human side, so kind of a similar background, and has that appreciation you do with many sides of our business, which is unique. So they published this paper and looked at historical data. She was treating with a lower power device, and looked at before she was using any kind of laser. So had kind of a really nice, database of how they were doing, and with the high powered laser, the time to death was like, maybe 36 months more than the others. So these dogs were living, years more when they started treating with the laser device. And what they found is that they really had to bump up the dosage. So even though it's high power, they have to treat for longer times as well to get that type of result. And we do lots of research. We kind of came with that dosage because we worked with Oklahoma State's vet school, and made some sensors that we put in the spinal cord, and then saw how much light gets to the spinal cord when you're treating above the fur. So we do a lot of research like that to make sure, the dosages and the protocols that we have are all scientifically grounded. We just don't tell you to point and shoot. We want to make sure that that we have a really good idea. We do computer models. We do, work like we did with these cadaver dogs of different colors. And so we have a really good idea of how much light's getting to the area that we want to target.
And of course, Oklahoma State is my alma mater too. So go Pokes! Anytime we bring that up. Once you bleed orange, that's all there is.
And we work with their vet school and their football team.
Perfect.
There's quite a few Light Force units that they're treating players. So it's a.
I worked at the horse farm when I was there, and then I also helped with Bullet, which is the horse that runs on the football field.
Oh, cool!
After the touchdowns. So, because if there's a horse around, I'm probably going to try to find a way to be involved. Oh, so Brian, tell us for our listeners out there, if they're more intrigued with laser therapy, places they can get more information. I know I've written a few blog posts and have a couple other podcasts about it, and we can definitely dive into some deeper conversations in other podcasts if you and your team would like to do that. But where can they get more information?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good resources online. Our main website for the company, the company's called LiteCure. And that's kind of the science and everything behind. And then the brands are Light Force would be the medical brand. Companion Animal Health is our small animal, and Pegasus Laser Therapy is the equine brand. So, but you can find a link to all of those at litecure.com. So litecure.com. You can find a lot of info there. It'll take you to all three, or then the corporate site has a lot of these studies on there, or summaries of them. So that's if they want to learn more about science, that's a good place for people to go. All three brands have, Instagram, which is always good, or, LinkedIn groups to follow. We have a lot of good information there. So that's probably the best way to get educated. There's also a company, the American Institute of Medical Laser Applications. So it's AIMLA, AIMLA. So they have a lot of education online. People can take courses. There's CE approved courses for professionals if they need continuing education. And it's got some good, information or links to, different articles.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure and get all that out there, because you guys do have a fantastic educational side of the research, and even videos and different things like that for all levels of education, from just direct to consumer to professional, and everything kind of in between. So if you want to go get your science nerd on, you can do that. Or if you just want to learn more, you can do that as well.
There's some good videos, on there. There's some good custom, patient testimonials, both from all sides of the business. People are, kind of posting and other things. But it's great to talk to someone like you who has, that familiarity with many sides of the business. I try to wear many hats of the different fields. I'm not an expert in any, but play a role in all of them. But it's kind of cool to see, the differences and the commonalities, more commonalities than differences.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, as I really tend towards horses and riders, if you really break down our anatomy, it's so similar. It's more similar than it is different. So anytime, you can extrapolate that information. So that's what's fun for me, is to extrapolate that around to help people get towards their goals.
Yeah, it's great working with, people on the vet side, because they're using it for all kinds of things. We're on the medical side, because of the FDA and other regulations, we have to be more conservative on our marketing, but learning, what people are trying it for. And, I think discussions you and I have had in the past, like, there's very little harm, right? That's the good thing about laser therapy, is that there's very little harm. So people are trying it on a lot of things, and then we can extrapolate that, do the research, and prove it out for really exciting new applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people get hung up, whether we're talking about these modalities or other different products, if it's not, and it's something I talk about a lot, it's not harmful, then let's try it and see where that application actually stands so that we can, like you said, help extrapolate that, and it may lead to even a bigger breakthrough down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today, Brian. Thank you for sitting down with me on this podcast. I really, this is a fun project that I enjoy doing, and so I'm very glad that we were able to connect.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm looking forward to coming back on, maybe answer some questions or, talk about specific applications.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
Great. Thanks, Farley.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Writer's Edge Podcast. For show notes and other thoughts, head over to writersedgetherapy.com. If you would like to stay connected and continue the conversation, head over to my free Facebook group, Writer's Edge Health and Wellness for Horse and Rider. Thanks for continuing the conversation, and as always, I will see you down the road.